Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Kickback. We loved having Jordan here the first time with us. We just had to invite her back because she's released more books. Jordan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be back.
It's lovely to see you. You've had a lot happen since the last time that we spoke, haven't you?
Yes, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, a good one, as always. I think when we spoke last, there were just two books um, on shelves, and now there are four. We've doubled it, which has been fantastic.
And you also have a new edition, almost a new edition.
Almost a new edition, yet we have got a little friend coming along for Henry sometime, hopefully in March. But babies have their own they have their own schedule, so who knows when they'll make their appearance.
And you are still not taking a break.
Uh, no, I do struggle to stop doing things. I just compulsively want to do. But I promise I will. I promise I will.
Okay, you keep promising it. I'm waiting for it. So, like you said, we're on to the third and the fourth installment of the Wonder Team series, and I am basically losing count, to be honest with you. The adventure keeps evolving, and you're introducing so many new elements to the books as it comes along. And not only are the characters kind of evolving, but so is the storyline and how adventurous things actually get as well, which is so exciting to see. So I can't believe how quickly it's moving though. So how are you writing these books so quickly?
Well, I mean, there's when you're writing kids' books, it's quite a demanding timeline anyway. The publication cycle we kind of want to hit is a sort of a new book every 6 to 8 months, and I think people always are surprised by that. But actually, when you're writing these books, the first draft doesn't take as long as you think it's going to take. There's a phase at the beginning where Leah and I are planning, we're talking, we're obviously choosing what we're going to write about and what the story is going to focus on, and then you have maybe between 3 and 5 weeks where that first draft gets written. And then from that point on, that's your foundation. And a lot of the hard work starts because you're going back and forward with editors to try and really pin down that story and make it brilliant. So for me, I probably have contact time with the manuscript of these books for maybe 3 or 4 months max. And then the last kind of 2-ish months is devoted to that printing, because that takes a lot of time as well. There's an awful lot of people who work behind the scenes. Once I lift my hands off that laptop, once Leah and I are happy with where it is, um, that's when a whole host of people kind of kick into gear and they start making the book a reality, and you have to allocate time for that as well. So it is quite a sharp turnaround, but personally I quite like that. I think I work well to deadlines anyway. I like having that kind of fire lit under me to get something done. And once you get really immersed in a story, for me at least personally, I find it very hard to step away anyway.
Mhm.
There's that kind of push to get to the finish line and say, "Whew, finished, done, look at it." Of course, that's before you have to take into account all the edits that come afterwards as well to make it even better.
I mean, have you now quite gotten used to the process? I mean, now that it is, the third and the fourth books are coming out. I mean, I can't imagine what it must like. What thoughts did you have when you were writing that first one and then working to these sorts of timelines? Did it just fit to the type of person that you sort of are when it comes to writing, or was it just like, I gotta get this done quick?
The first one, because it was the first time I was doing it, I was also learning as I was going. I think that's true of both Leah and I. We'd never gone through this process before, so we really were taking it step by step. And our publishers were fantastic as well because they gave us that bit of time. So actually, I think that the kind of creation timeline, if you like, for the first book was a little bit longer than the ones that followed, just while we were kind of finding our groove and getting into the motion of it all. Then when we got onto the second book, it kind of felt more like a well-oiled, well, not, no, the second book didn't feel like a well-oiled machine, but it was quicker than the first, but by the time we got to the third one, we knew what we were doing. We kind of settled into the pattern. And as well, I kind of found, I find myself that once what one is finished, I'm already thinking then about the next one. um so when we spoke last, we were technically talking about the Pharaoh's Fortune, but this Rainforest Rescue was already at the printers. It had been written, it had been edited, it was getting itself into gear for publication in August. So that's sometimes a fun balance, because whilst one is being released and we're talking about one, our heads are still very much in the one that's yet to come, because we've already finished that one too. If that makes sense, because you're just keeping up with that quite demanding cycle.
Interesting. So the third book, which I have here,
There it is.
um, takes place in Tanzania.
It does indeed, yes.
And it's all about conservation and it's all about saving chimpanzees. How did you come up with the theme for the book? How do you decide what part of this world that we live in is what you need to write about?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of the time when we're deciding where we want to go with these books, we take a lot of inspiration from, what's going on around us, and the world that we're in at the moment. I mean, we'll get onto the space race in a moment, but for that one, we're very conscious that women in STEM and sorry, so like science, tech, engineering, I think does the maths, um, that is a topic that's like sort of at the forefront of our generation, really. Certainly for me, going through school, I was always very aware um, of the kind of agenda to push girls towards STEM subjects, because traditionally we're the underrepresented gender. um well, actually, to be fair, any gender that just isn't male is underrepresented in these industries, and there's a push to highlight that. So we felt that was important. And similarly, climate change is a massive, massive topic that can sometimes be quite divisive, which is surprising given that it's the world we live in and we've got a responsibility to look after it. And there's also this kind of, there should be this understanding that not only is it the planet that we're custodians of, but also everything on it, and wildlife and animals, they all contribute towards the health of the general health of the world, and the climate we live in. And I just think that with climate change being so front and center in terms of policy, often not as front and center as it should be, we owed it to kind of our readers, if we're going to fully represent amazing things that women have done, to explore the amazing women who are involved in the effort to try and help the planet and its wildlife inhabitants.
I don't know, this just popped into my mind when you were talking about this. Was this, and I don't know whether the timelines actually match up with it at all, but it just came into my mind. Was this all influenced by when Leah went to speak at the UN for what was it, the global I can't remember what it's called now. But she went to
She
America
did.
to
Yeah, she
talk
did.
at the UN. Was did that have any influence at all?
The timelines didn't coincide, but what did play a big part in it was Leah's passion for conservation and the environment and being mindful of climate change. And that was reflected quite heavily in our decision to kind of follow this path. Yeah.
I didn't realize that she had a passion for it, to be honest with you. But that's really nice to know that actually that she is conscious about these sorts of things and it's something that she cares about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as well, she's really mindful that she has a big platform, and there are lots of issues that she feels quite positive, quite passionately about. So she's keen to use that platform positively to kind of talk about that. Sometimes it's limited in terms of the opportunities that are there to talk about it, but I know that without putting words in her mouth, really, that she's very mindful of the impact that climate change is having on our lives now, but also on the future to come. So
Hmm, okay. And and this is another thing. I feel like as if with the Rainforest Rescue, you guys added so many different elements of diversity in so many different ways. And obviously the book's main character, Bupe, she is also deaf. And so how did you decide to kind of, why was it important to include a character that has to include things like sign language and has to include a different way of communicating and those sorts of things in the book?
um I mean, I think it's important for the very same reasons that it's important that not everyone in the book is white or straight or just from England. Um, there are so many different types of people that make up our world. And once we put a book out into the world, there's no knowing who is going to pick it up and read it. And I think you and I have discussed this before as well, but I was so keen, and Leah as well, we were so keen for our books to provide a real diverse range of characters so that if somebody who experiences deafness or hearing impairment picks up our book, they can also see themselves reflected in stories, um, because that's not always the case. It hasn't been historically. I mean, it's amazing the work that's being done in children's literature at the moment to change that. But historically speaking, those typical children's classics, they don't always have that. Um, and we wanted to make sure that we did.
That's really, I think it's really important as well because it just means that anybody who picks up the book, they can read it and feel like, hey, that's me. Or, and that's a great feeling when somebody picks it up and then they read it and they say, hey, I can actually really relate to this book.
Yeah,
People can pick up the book and say, oh, it's because, they're fans of Leah and Jordan. But then when they actually read the book, they're like, hey, they've actually included somebody who's like me. And that's a whole other different type of feeling and a whole other different type of appreciation and a genuine gratefulness for what the authors are trying to do in the book. So I think it's a really beautiful thing.
thank you. And I do also have to take this opportunity to just acknowledge as well that I know that we are two white girls who have not we only have our lived experience, which is heavily a heavily privileged one. And this is where our publishers are invaluable and our editors are invaluable because we really want for these stories to read authentically, and they are always there to make sure that they do. We have sensitivity readers that come in and read the books, before publication, just to make sure that what we're saying is actually accurate, and it portrays an element of that lived experience realistically, if not as much of it as we possibly can. um, and that's really important to us because we don't want to be including characters and making up their experiences, because we haven't gone through them. So we try really hard, and our publishers are fantastic in supporting it to make sure that as many hands as necessary get an input into it to make sure that we're not saying something that's wrong.
I appreciate that, but I think, I mean, not just in the books, but every time that we've spoken as well, do you know what I mean? And although you're like, yes, you come from, white privileged background and everything like, you've never shied away from it. But secondly, you've never also lacked an understanding or trying to understand where people who don't look like you come from. And actually, that's exactly what we need people to do. It's not like, oh, I can't step into that place because I am afraid of what I might say. It's more like I'm not quite sure whether I 100% understand this, but I want to understand and I want to be, an advocate. That's how I see it. Like every time I speak to you about these things, and I know we've had conversations. Certainly, during summer when it was very difficult. It was very difficult for me actually with everything that was going on with the riots and things like that. And obviously we had a fair few messages back and forth about things. And if anything, you were just like, you were very reassuring, you were very caring and just genuine in your response. And for me, it felt like actually maybe everything isn't so bad. Do you know what I mean? Like there is that hope type of thing. And it was nice to hear it from you and other people who had actually reached out to say that, are you okay type of thing. And I think from people who do look like me, that's what we need more of. And I just want to say that I appreciated that. And do you know what? I don't think I don't think people realize the actual impact that it does have on somebody who does look like me and stuff. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Well, I really appreciate you saying it. I mean, sadly, I do think that what happened in the summer shows that there is still a lot more work to be done.
Mhm.
Um, that it is unfortunately more often than not a case of lip service rather than actual action. But there are, you know, I find it comforting to know that there are people out there who are trying to make a difference in the face of others like that, who are very much not trying to make a difference or even to understand a different point of view. Um, so I do really appreciate it. I am also very conscious that the work is not done. There is still work to be done on a wider scale. But I sincerely hope that you, not even we, you never have to experience anything like you did in the summer, because that would be, I mean, it's a tragedy that it happened in the first place, but it would be even more tragic if lessons were not learned.
That's true. But
So,
I hope that and I hope that Leah knows as well, that the diversity and the amount of stuff that you guys put in your books just means that young minds are shaped. And the more young minds that are shaped to feel like this is completely, normal to have people from all different backgrounds who have equal opportunities, who can be anything they want to be, and that is perfectly normal. It just means that, the kids that are reading the books now, when they grow up, they'll be like, yeah, this is the world, this is how it's meant to be, and that's
I
what you're
hope
meant to be
so.
doing.
I really hope so. Fingers crossed.
I think it is, and you know what? It still opens my eyes as well to lots of different things that maybe I didn't consider. Like for example, like in the books, I found it really interesting to know that sign language is different in different countries. And you know what? You never think about it. You don't actually think about it until somebody points it out, and you pointed it out that sign language is actually different in different. It's a universal language, but there are different, you have to translate it almost, right?
It's one of my favorite things that during the researching of the book that I came across was that understanding that actually, even if Leah and her friends had known sign language, they wouldn't have been able to use it to communicate with Bupe, because British Sign Language is not the sign language she knows. It's a language just like any other, and it differs from region to region. So yeah, I always think that's really cool. I mean, it's even, you have those variations, don't you, in terms of uh, even in the UK, we have British Sign Language and we have Makaton, and they are vastly different. And when you look at American Sign Language, it's called ASL as opposed to BSL because it's American. The signs, although they might be similar, are completely different. Even though technically it's all English, it's like almost, I mean, it almost feels like the same way you have different dialects in different places. Um, but then you have other countries who are kind of talking in completely different ways because their languages are totally different. It's honestly fascinating.
It is. And how did you find that out?
I had an inkling because
Mhm.
I thought, well, surely it can't be the same. Like, every time we write these books and the kids go to different countries, we have to have that conversation of, okay, we can't ignore that there's a language barrier here, because in real life there's a language barrier here. So do the characters have to have a translator? Do the characters they meet, just do they know English? And this was just sort of a consideration similar to that, really, was okay, if if Bupe has is deaf in, well, predominantly in one ear, how does she communicate with those around her, and how does she also communicate with her new friends? So I kind of had an inkling that it was going to be something we'd have to look into. But yeah, it was fascinating.
Mm. And also, I always learn so much from you, Jordan. I messaged you yesterday being like, I don't understand what this sentence means. I just didn't know
Yeah.
you could use the word like that. I just didn't know.
Do you know what that comes from the fact that I basically spend 99% of my time reading. And I always have. I mean,
Mm.
it's, don't get me wrong, it's a lot harder now that I'm a parent, and you kind of have to, although, becoming a parent hasn't stopped me from pursuing the things that I'm interested in, because it's so important to still to retain that sense of yourself. And I would say that for both myself and for my husband. It just means that we have to do all those things we love after bedtime, after bath time, after bedtime, um, and in smaller chunks of time. But regardless, when I was younger, I read, and that's continued all the way through my life. And I've picked up vocabulary. And my issue is that sometimes I've learnt words from books, so I don't know how to pronounce them properly. Um, for years, the word facade I used to pronounce facade because that's how it's spelt. And I'd never heard somebody use it in context. So how did I know I was saying it wrong? Um, and
Nobody
that's so
corrected you.
I have the opposite. Well, the sort of, it's not the opposite, but like I have a slightly different problem. Is I pick up all these words and I know what they mean and I can use them in a sentence, but then I've got to say them in real life and they come out like absolute gobbledygook because I've got no idea how to pronounce it. I've only ever read it.
I love that. It's brilliant though. I mean, from this book, the two words that I really like, there was onyx to
Yeah.
describe the eyes of the chimpanzees and the gorillas and stuff. I just love the word. It's so very regal.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a bit more interesting than saying that they had dark eyes, isn't it? Um, and that's when I used to be a teacher. That's what I always used to say to the kids, is I always used to be like, yeah, okay, you can say something is nice, but there are so many more words that you could use to describe that thing than just nice.
Hmm.
Um, so a lovely way of making something a bit more, just a bit more interesting.
And then the other word was din. I'd never heard of it. I legit thought it was a completely other language. I thought it was a typo. Not gonna lie. And then I Googled it. I was like, I was like,
Yeah,
Jordan is meticulous. This would not be a typo. What on earth is this word?
yeah, din, something very loud, a loud collection of noises.
Which you get a lot at football matches, actually.
That is the perfect application of the word din.
Yes.
Yeah, that is exactly what you get at a football match. A roaring din.
Yeah, it literally a roaring din. I was at when I was at the it was at the Chelsea match, and I completely forgot to bring my headphones, and the girl sitting behind me, oh, my ears are extremely sensitive, and the girl sitting behind me was screaming her head off, and I was just like, okay, my ears are definitely going to hurt after this.
Yeah.
That was a roaring din for
That
sure.
was a din.
Really honestly was. But yeah, it was, I mean, now what I want to do is use the words that I pick up in these books and then use it to confuse people, mainly my sister. Is
I love that. So vindictive. Knowledge is power.
just, oh, hopefully
Oh,
she probably
brilliant.
won't watch this because she'll be way too busy to listen to it. But I'm going to confuse her with these words.
I mean, why not?
Why not? Why
Why
not?
not?
Why not? Um, so the other part of it is, so I like that you also use different words in their language as well. So you put some Swahili words in there as well. And
Yes.
when I saw the Swahili words, I was like, oh my God, because it's really actually quite similar to Hindi as well.
Oh,
So
is it? I did not know that.
yeah, so because I think. and lots of people who probably watch this will correct me if I'm wrong. But because we have a lot of migration from India to Africa as well, so some of the words do tend to get mixed up and stuff. And
Merge
so when you say
blend.
acha, I'm
That's
like,
so cool.
yes, that's Hindi.
That's so cool. I had
Yeah.
no idea that. Do you know what? That is one of the fascinating things, isn't it? How like different cultures, because of the way they intersect throughout history, they like absorb language. Um, it's just, yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is because like both my dad and my brother-in-law, they're both from Africa, so they both
Oh,
grew
cool.
up
Okay.
speaking Swahili.
Ah,
So I'm like, oh my God, yeah, and then my brother-in-law will bust out with some Swahili words
mm,
every now and then, and so will my dad, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. So it was nice to again see that representation in the book as well, and I was just like, yeah, that's a
good.
good piece of my history in here. I like it.
And
So
I think as well, like, the kids are in Tanzania.
mm,
There's Swahili is going to be spoken around them.
yeah.
They might not understand it, but it's going to be there. So it was nice. Although I'm always so nervous about putting words in that are not in my native language, because I'm like, oh, have I used that right? I remember when we did the Pharaoh's Fortune, there was so much back and forth about whether the term ama was technically correct for um Khalid's aunt, or whether we had to, was it right? Did it was it do we need to change it so that the formality was, it was, that went on for quite a long time, just to kind of make sure we got it just so.
But it's really interesting though because even the word amma is like in different languages it means the same thing.
Yeah,
Like in Tamil it means mother. Like in South India it means mother. So it's a form of respect. Like when
yeah,
somebody calls you amma, it's like a form of respect. So I think it's a really nice touch to put those in there because it shows a real appreciation again for culture and it just shows that actually you've done your research as well. And yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
good.
So yeah, I quite like it. So like I said, it feels like as if you mentioned this before as well. The book's got a little bit of everything in there, and in fact, you also included some LGBTQIA plus in there as well, which I was quite surprised by it actually. Although I probably shouldn't be, but I was, and it may be because it's in a children's book. But why was it important to include that element of it in the book, especially as a children's book?
For exactly the same reason that Bupe is deaf. Um, we wouldn't shy away from putting a heterosexual couple in there. If you look at the parents of the three main characters, they are all heterosexual couples. Um, but it's not the norm in our society, really, especially not anymore. Um, and again, it was about reflecting that. Um, and I think as well, it was about reflecting that without making it a massive deal, because
Mm,
we wouldn't we wouldn't even think twice about putting a character in that has a mum and a dad. So I just, for me, and for Leah, it was, we kind of thought, well, why is it any different um if there are two mums or two dads? There are readers who are going to have that as their reality. Don't they deserve to have that represented in a children's book just as easily as normal heterosexual couples are portrayed in the vast majority? And I think that was really important to us. And I think it was important that it felt natural, like it wasn't something we needed to make a big song and dance about. It was just that, at the end of the book, Bupe has a family and she's married to a woman, and that's it.
it's really heartwarming actually. Like I was surprised, and then when I read it, and I was just like, you get that little bit like warm feeling inside. You're just like, but and I think that's why it's really important that you have included it at such a young age so that people do understand, and just think of it like we said as normal.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there with that word exposure. because for so long, we have shied away from portraying anything in kind of children's literature specifically that strays outside the bounds of what we identify as normal. Um, but I just think when you look at the society we live in, what is normal anymore? That's not the word normal doesn't make sense because everybody's normal is different.
Mm.
Um, okay, we can talk about the normal that a kind of more conservative worldview tells me should be normal. Um, but actually, even then, I'm a white woman who is married to a white man. Um, and still what everyone tells me is normal when I look at my family and my friends, the people I interact with when I go to work, the literature I'm personally consuming, what I'm watching on the telly, all of those things seem to actively defy this idea of normal. And I just think that why would we not expose our children to that idea as early as possible? Um, because all it's going to achieve is that they'll grow up accepting everybody and seeing normal in everybody, regardless of who they choose to love or what color their skin is, or whether they have to use a wheelchair to get around or whether they have a hearing aid. I just think it just makes complete sense in my mind. If you want to produce well-adjusted, considerate, kind adults, that has to start in childhood. It has to start in childhood. And you know recent events show that actually we're not always producing these kind of kind, compassionate individuals. So something has to change. And literature, children's literature in particular, is something we can really influence actively. And it's something that they can then access through libraries, through schools, and in my opinion, all for the better.
I love it. It's I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. As good as you are at writing, Jordan, you're also extremely articulate.
Only when I've had a cup of coffee.
Which you can't have right now.
Well, I can have one a day.
Really?
And boy, do I enjoy that one. Yes, you could. Fun fact: you can have up to 200 milligrams of caffeine a day, I think a single shot of coffee has something like 90 milligrams in it. So I can have a cup of coffee and enjoy it, but I can't go too crazy because other things have caffeine in, like if I want a glass of Coke or a chocolate bar also has caffeine in, so I've got to be mindful of that. Even a cup of tea. So caffeine is everywhere, but I can enjoy one cup of coffee a day, and I really do.
Okay, good. Just make sure you keep an eye on your blood pressure, please.
Yes, don't worry, I'm all good with blood pressure.
Good.
But I always get that thing. Do you ever get that thing where you go in for your like routine appointments and they say, "Oh, I'm going to check your blood pressure," and I'm like, ah! And then I think to myself, don't panic, because if you panic, that's going to make your blood pressure higher, and then there's going to be a reason for concern. And I have to really force myself to sit there and breathe.
You know what? It's helpful having a friend in healthcare.
Oh, it's very helpful. Very helpful.
Anyway, back to the
Yes,
book. Back to the book. Where
let's,
did I
yeah.
go? We always do this. We always do this, don't we?
Get off topic.
Okay, here we go. Right. So I felt like as the series has gone on, the characters are really coming out their shells and really showing their individual characteristics and the individual personalities. Because in the beginning, it's like, oh, everybody's getting on really well, and yeah, we're all there for each other, we're all friends, everything's hunky-dory. And then come to book two, three, four, everybody's like, what the hell, man? Why did you do that? Everybody's becoming, they're challenging each other in friendships, which is really, really good and very refreshing to see that actually, not everything has to be hunky-dory, but it also doesn't mean I'm going to break up with because you said it. Do you know what I
Yes,
mean?
absolutely. Yeah, we wanted them. We want, at the end of the day, they're meant to be real people. Um, and we wanted them to make the mistakes that real people make. And when people make mistakes, often the first reaction of those around them is less than pleased. Um, and we also wanted um, to represent the fact that kids have these friendships, but arguments are normal. Arguments are healthy ways of getting out emotion rather than storing it all inside. And actually, okay, maybe it's not very nice having a friend be cross with you, um, but that doesn't mean, oh well, he shouted at me, so now we're not friends anymore. It's a way for those around you to process their own emotions, and we wanted to explore that really with particularly George and Leah. You know, George as a character, he's a worrisome little thing. He gets quite anxious about stuff. He's always the one that's he's the one that's least likely to throw himself into the path of danger, despite the fact he often finds himself there. And you know, I think that by the time they go back for their third trip, he's getting a little bit irate with how easily the watch throws them into these potentially dangerous situations. And I think his frustration comes to the boiling point in the third book because he's only there because Leah has pressed the watch and sent them back in an effort to make herself feel better because there's a new player on the team that's challenging her position, and actually she wants to prove that she's still the best at something, and she has something that this new player doesn't, and it's a magic watch, and they're going to go back in time, and then she'll show everyone that she's, you know, she's worthy of everybody's respect. But what she actually does in the process of doing that is drags her friends back with her and doesn't give them that choice. And again, this ties back to the whole thing of she realizes almost immediately that she's made a mistake and that it wasn't something that she should have done. And people aren't perfect. And it's okay if you make mistakes. And it's okay if your friends are angry about that. Because if you're actually, you know, if that friendship is a true friendship, which it often is, it will be able to survive. Arguing at the end of the day is just another form of communicating. And if that argument isn't happening, but those emotions are simmering, they're just going to keep simmering until they're boiling. And then that is suddenly resentment and potentially a confrontation that the friendship might not survive. So we wanted to just basically, all of that to say, we wanted to have, in this book, we wanted to explore those frustrations, and we wanted the characters to explore their emotions in a healthy way with each other. And that was really to show our readers that it can be done, and it doesn't, just because somebody is angry at you, it doesn't mean that they don't want to be your friend anymore.
I think that's really good because when you do think back to when you're in school and things like that, friendships do fall apart very easy for the smallest of things. And this kind of shows the resilience, and actually there's just that bit of love and compassion in the friendship that is so recognized that actually solidifies that no, we're friends through and through, like through thick and thin, no matter what, irrespective of who makes what mistakes. We understand why mistakes were made, and we'll help you through that. And I think that's exactly what happened in this book. And I
Absolutely.
think it's really interesting when you say that, oh, you know, Leah wanted to prove herself, you know, that she's worthy of still being on the team. And, you know, it's all about that competition, that competitiveness. And obviously,
Yeah.
we know within football, there is always a lot of competition. And, you
Yeah.
know, obviously, we've just had the transfer window, lots of players coming in and out of different teams and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
I don't know whether you know this or not, or anything like that, but do you feel like as if this happens in real life where people do feel threatened that, oh, look, somebody else who is, you know, who can play in my position, is coming in, could potentially take my spot?
I mean, I can't say yes or no because obviously I've not been in that position specifically in regards to football. Um, but I'd be very surprised if the answer was no, because I think that kind of attitude exists in any industry. You know, I was um, a writer before I worked on these books with Leah. I was a marketing writer. And there's always a sense of, is that person a better writer than me? Are they going to get better articles than me because they're better than I am? Will they be trusted with that more than me? Is that going to have an impact on my performance? And you know, that's just your run of the mill writing job. That's not having to contend with stepping out onto a football pitch in front of however many thousands of people. Um, so I would be really surprised if the answer was no. But obviously I've never experienced it, so I can't say one way or the other that that competitiveness, that insecurity, um, does exist. But I would be surprised because I personally I think it exists in every industry, um, and the only way to navigate it really is to have a really solid sense of who you are, and to be confident in that, and also to accept that actually just as much as you have weaknesses, anybody coming in that looks fantastic will also have their own weaknesses. Okay, they might be different weaknesses to you. And that's why you look at them and think, oh my goodness, you're so much better than me. Look how well you do that, or look how well you do this. But what you're not seeing is the things they don't do so well that maybe you do well, and they've noticed that. So I think that the way to kind of combat it, if you like, is just to embrace the fact that there will always be somebody out there who is better than you at something. But that doesn't mean that you are not good. It just means that that person is better at that thing in the
Or
same way that you might be
replaceable.
better at something than them, you know.
Or
Um,
replaceable. I think that's important as well because I think people have a fear of being replaceable as well, don't they? There is
yes.
that insecurity that if somebody's better than you, but exactly like you said, people have different attributes which makes them, stronger in certain areas. And again, I'm relating this back to football. Is all of a sudden this is the only way I know how to. But I'm like, you will bring on different defenders because they do have different qualities as
Yeah.
well in
We
terms
do
of
different things.
they do complete different things. We know
I
for
mean, I don't, I, you know, that I'm not like really up on the technicalities of football, but I think a really good example is if you look at Leah and you look at Millie Bright, when they work together, they work as a great team, but their function is totally different. The reason they work well as a team is because they both have different jobs in that partnership. So actually, if they both came on and they were both good at the same thing, they wouldn't be as effective because
very true.
why do you need two people who can do the same job?
Agreed. And let's just give a bit of a shout out to Leah's long range passing accuracy.
Yes, the hoof.
What? What's
Hoof,
the
you
roof?
know. So I in my brain I always call it the hoof when the ball goes back to them and they kind of pass it between each other, or they're sort of sussing out what they're going to do, and then suddenly Leah will just do the hoof, and it sends the ball right down the other end. That's it. That's what. But you don't know when the hoof is coming because
You
they're sort
don't
of passing
know.
it back. So you're like, when's it going to happen? Is it now or not yet? It's that unpredictability. Yeah, I just in my head I call it the hoof.
I love that so much. But you're absolutely right. I'm literally like when I'm watching football with my dad, and I'm like, Leah, hit it long, kick it long, and then she doesn't do it. I'm like, why'd you do it? And then I'm just like, why? Because do you know what? In my brain, I am still like, I know it takes a lot of practice, but something in my head is like, because I think it's because I'm a scientist, right? In my head, I'm calculating and I'm like, if does she think about it like this? Like, if she pulls her leg back a certain distance and she kicks it with a certain amount of force, and she knows how quickly the person the forward is running, that she can accurately kick the ball to land exactly where she wants it to go. So then the forward can continue to go and score a goal. Is that how it works? Or is it just like, nah, looks about right, kick it?
We'll never know.
Ask
We'll
her.
never know.
Actually, no,
But then,
don't, because she might
do you know,
reveal her
the thing is though,
secret.
I could ask her, but how will I know she's telling me the truth?
Yeah, exactly.
In the moment, it
Yeah.
could be one, it could be the other. And actually, that also might be so. She might turn around and say, oh, well, it just depends. It depends on the situation, depends on the context.
Also, oh, yeah, no, that actually, I anticipate that's probably the answer we would get.
So, yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it?
But it's just fascinating. For me, it's really fascinating. And I tend to look at things from a very geeky perspective, is what I say. Quite a geeky perspective. And I'm just like, wow, that was really good. Or like, I think that's why for me, when I watch women's football, I'm like, these are literally like normal human beings doing like almost superhero stuff, is what it feels like to me. And like when Amanda Illister does a header, oh my God, or Lotte's header that she did against Man City. She
Yeah.
went flying. She went flying and she scored the goal, but literally her body went and I
And
was
you
just
just could,
like
I just think I could never, my body just doesn't do that. It just doesn't make that shape.
it doesn't, no,
Like,
but it
there's
was
no
just
way.
no, even just the movement, the quickness of the movement and stuff. And I'm just like mesmerized. That's what it is. Mesmerizing. Okay, fangirl moment over. Right. Okay. Right. So there's another element. You added so many different elements to this that there's just so much to talk about. So you also included so much about music in the book as well. And we're still on
Yeah.
the Rainforest Rescue. And you included the Supremes in this, which was I absolutely loved because growing up, me and my dad, like whenever we were in the car, dad's driving us somewhere, what does he put in? He puts in some Motown, puts in some Supremes, love it. Bit of Smokey Robinson, all of them. So how did you decide who to include?
Okay, well, first and foremost, Motown is always a big feature at a lot of our family parties. Um, it just is. But also we just didn't want to choose a white male band. Basically, we wanted somebody from a diverse background that we felt our characters were going to our Tanzanian characters particularly were going to empathize with a bit more. And also, it's really cool that in at this time in history, you had these group of women that were doing this, and it wasn't the done thing. Um, so again, it was, I think, another way for us to insert some powerful women in there, and recognize, their achievements. Also, I think because the book is set in the 60s, which is like, for music, that was a really explosive time. And the culture of the 60s was just sort of it was so new, it was so fresh. Um, but we've plonked these three kids down in the middle of a rainforest, hundreds and miles away from civilization, where actually getting in contact with that culture is a little bit harder. Music was a way that we could do that, because it showed, okay, these people are living in this rainforest, studying these chimpanzees, but actually they have their own interests. They're very much a product of their time. So having that connection was important.
It's great. I mean, it really made me think to say to my dad, Dad, can you pull out the old record player and pull out the vinyls and, just put on a few of those vinyls. Like my dad's got a wicked vinyls collection,
That's
like
cool.
just like a full collection of it. And yeah, it's nice memories actually for me, like going back and seeing that. So I think it's a good way to sort of place where the book is taking place in terms of a timeline as well. So I think it's really good. Um And I think as well, obviously, it's a really good nod to the love of music within your family as well.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Um, so there are some things that I wanted to actually check as well because you said in one part of the book it says that you shouldn't smile at a chimpanzee. Is that actually true?
According to my research, it is.
Really?
Yeah, chimpanzees, like baring their teeth,
Hmm.
is a sign of aggression. So for us, when we're smiling at somebody, we're happy. But chimpanzees, that's not the case. It can be seen as threatening behavior. So yeah, according to my research, that is factual.
Wow. Well, if I ever, you might have saved a lot of lives, Jordan.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be someone out there who's saying, that's rubbish. She's just made that up. I promise when I did my research, it did say that that was a sign of chimpanzee aggression, particularly in the wild.
I'm going to tell my brother-in-law that he loves animals. He's massively into animals and stuff. So I'm going to tell him that and see what he says too.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever been to Africa?
Oh no, and I'd love to go. I'd really love to go. Um, when I was at uni, I did some charity work, and there were five projects to choose from. Four of them went to Africa, and one went to India, and I went on the Indian project. Um, and I always feel like Africa is somewhere that I'd love to spend time there, and I just haven't got around to it, and I will. Definitely one day. Um, but no, not yet.
Don't worry, we will get you there. We will get you there because we'll come on to a bit of your charity work, but Sierra Leone is always calling. So
Calling.
well, obviously after you've had your baby settled down, everything like
Yes.
that, we will talk about it then. But yeah, I'm sure we'll go to Africa and,
Yeah,
and Sierra
I would
Leone.
love to. Love to.
But actually, okay, speaking of actually then let's just go on to it now. So speaking of all the charity work, Sierra Leone and everything like that, tell us a little bit about, you and Rob spent January firstly raising money for Gosh, but you also do a lot of charity work for a charity in Sierra Leone as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your passion projects, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, so as you said, Great Ormond Street is one that my family do a lot of work for, and a lot of that is down to the fact that some people will know, but some people won't. When my son was born, he was born with a severe heart condition, which was diagnosed when he was 2 days old, and he was rushed to Great Ormond Street where they performed open heart surgery, and basically saved his life. Something we will be forever grateful for. So, every January, I try and do something, usually something related to running. Gosh actually run an initiative called Janu Run, which is running 31 miles in January. I've done that for the last 2 years. This year, I'm not sure if it was running this year, but even if it was, I couldn't have done it because I'm 8 months pregnant. And there are people who can run whilst pregnant, and I am not one of them. Um, so instead, Rob said he would do something for me. So he's just completed 5K a day in January, which is just monumental. That's more than I've ever been able to do. And I think his fundraising total at the moment is just shy of £1,300. So we actually last year I think I raised 800, and our goal this year was just to make more than 800. So we set our target for 1,000, and we've blown past that. So incredibly proud of him, and incredibly pleased and very grateful to all of the support that we've received. So yes, every January I just start asking people to give me their money, so that I can give it to Great Ormond Street, basically. But I mean, it's not just us. My cousins, they actually did a bike ride back in the autumn, and it was an incredibly amazing effort. And again, something I'd never be able to do. And they basically rode from Addenbrooke's in Cambridge, which is where my son was born, to Great Ormond Street, where his operation took place. Yeah, cycled the whole route. Um, and then when they were finished, my cousin announced he was never doing it again. So I was incredibly grateful. My sister-in-law is going to be running the Brighton Marathon at the start of March for Great Ormond Street. I think I'm trying to think what else we've done. My husband and his brother, they ran the London Landmarks half marathon for them. So we do an awful lot of fundraising for them, just to show how very grateful we are. But it's not the only thing we do. As you alluded to, I'm an ambassador for a charity called Better Lives Foundation, which is a charity that you are very involved with, and the reason that I am involved with it is you. So yeah, they run a hospital out in Sierra Leone, in an area that has almost no free healthcare. Something crazy like 2 registered dentists. Um, you know, the obstacles people face out there in terms of getting medical care where they need it's just huge. And having an institution like the LF have created just makes it so much easier for them to access healthcare that's also rooted in the locality, because it's not just about pumping money in, it's about providing education, it's about local people you know, getting that training, becoming doctors, medical professionals, and being able to provide care for their patients, you know, all the time, really. And I'm particularly involved or passionate about the maternity side of this for obvious reasons. You know, I have a son who's had his own healthcare issues, and I've got another one on the way who hopefully so far has no healthcare issues, but babies are very unpredictable. And pregnancy is an enormously fraught time for somebody. It's a huge thing to go through, and I just think having those professionals on hand who know what's normal, who can sort of soothe any concerns that you have, because it's also really anxiety inducing. You don't know, you know, what you're meant to be feeling, whether what you're feeling is right or wrong. There's no way of telling unless somebody who does know can tell you, you know. And I know that the hospital are working particularly at the moment, and BLF are working particularly at the moment on that maternity side of things, raising awareness about maternity healthcare, both post pre and postpartum, antenatal and postpartum. You know, both ends of the experience are just as important. And then also having that care in place for the babies that come out of this. And the wonderful thing about it as well is it's not just about providing a place for these women to come or to give birth. It's about providing a really holistic, all around approach to their care. You can't get to a hospital? Fine, we'll come to you. You want to have your baby at home? No worries. We've got the staff who are trained to do that. But these things don't happen on their own. You know, they're the sad fact of the matter is that money does make the world go round. And unfortunately, as much as we would like to be able to wave a magic wand and say, there you go, maternity health care for all, there has to be a little bit of hard work that goes into that as well. Awareness, fundraising. You know, we're talking about a region that has like the third worst infant maternal mortality rate in the world. That's ridiculous. And trying to kind of stem that flow is a big job. But there's lots of hard work going on behind the scenes. And I am very, very, very positive about it all. And hopefully we'll be able to go out and see the hospital, see the new maternity unit, and really experience it for myself.
Well,
Sorry, I've just rambled there for
no,
like
you
10
did.
minutes.
No, you
And you know,
did.
you sort of think, oh, I'm rattling off statistics here that I don't actually know if they're 100% right. So take everything I've said with a pinch of salt. But the
No,
website
you were right. You were
has
right.
fantastic stats on. I was right. I was okay. That makes me feel so much better. Um,
Brilliant memory. Oh, but no, all we can really say is, Jordan, thank you, Percy, for agreeing to say yes to becoming an ambassador for the charity. I don't think we would have reached our target or surpassed the target that we had set if it wasn't for, everything that that you were doing to promote, donations and everything like that. And I think it may have been like it can be really difficult because we are a smallish charity. So sometimes getting donations can be really difficult. Shipping things across this year, it costs an arm and a leg most of the time. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that we were able to reach our targets and for the maternity unit, I mean, it's just phenomenal. So again, thank you so much. And I don't know, I'm just glad that the universe has kind of come together so that we can meet to make all of these things happen, to be honest with you.
Everything happens for a reason.
It really does.
And
It really
really,
does.
my privilege and my joy to be involved with something like this. So, you
Man,
know,
you're just a genuinely good person. You need to just get good vibes from
but
people.
my head will grow and grow and explode.
No, you say that, but genuinely, like I don't tell things to people like just willy-nilly. I don't do that. I only do that if I get good vibes and I know like genuinely inside you're a good person, good heart, no ulterior motives and things like that. Just just genuinely good. You know what I mean? You get that feeling from people. That's what it is.
Well, thank you very, very much. That's very nice.